This is something that I try to forget, and sometimes I'm able to go for months on end without thinking about it, but it's been on my mind a lot here lately. This happened about 3 years after my grandpa passed away. He left my grandma living out on the property by herself. It wasn't a huge farm, but they had some cows, horses, and some chickens. She's always been a tough lady, but after he died, she started getting nervous being out there alone. I'll never forget that evening. It was right before dark when she called me. She was scared half to death. She said she'd been sitting on the porch when she saw what she thought was a big coyote down in the pasture. It was attacking one of the calves. She said it was the biggest coyote she'd ever seen in her life, and it wasn't just biting at the calf. It was on top of it, tearing into it. She ran inside and called me. Said she wasn't going back out there. She told me to hurry and bring a gun. Said even if I couldn't save the calf, maybe I could kill whatever this thing was before it came back again. By the time I got there, it was pretty much already dark. I ran inside first to check on her, and she was sitting at the kitchen table shaking. She kept saying coyotes don't get that big. That wasn't a coyote. I tried to calm her down, but she wasn't making a lot of sense. She was just repeating herself over and over. And just to be clear, at this moment in time, I had never even heard the word Dogman. I knew there was no way she was upset like this for no reason, so I told her to lock the doors and stay inside. I grabbed my rifle, an AR chambered in .308. I had a light mounted on it. I headed out the back door toward the pasture. I had a big spotlight, too, but I kept that in my hand just to scan around. I always kept a headlamp on as well. At first, I couldn't find where it had happened. The grass was pretty tall in spots, and I didn't see the calf right away. I kept walking farther down and finally started hearing something. A kind of wet sound like something chewing or tearing. As soon as I swung my light that direction, I saw it down by the fence. It was probably 40 yards away. Something was crouched over the calf. It was just ripping it apart. I mean, really in there, using its hands more than its mouth. The fur on it looked black, but the light washed a lot of the color out. I just remember how long its arms looked. When the light hit it, it jerked its head toward me so fast it didn't even look natural or real. That's when I saw its arm. Not a leg. This thing had arms. It was stuck down inside the calf's ribs. It jerked it back out, and I saw everything spill out onto the ground. That exact moment, it started growling. It wasn't like a coyote or even a big dog you would hear. It was deep, and it stayed steady for a long time. It's like this growl was coming from the depths of hell. I honestly don't know what I think these things are, but I do know that I feel strongly that no physical creature could produce a sound like that, not naturally. I knew this could go one of two ways, so I set the spotlight down in the grass and pulled the rifle up with the mounted light. It lit up dead center, and that's when I realized how big this thing really was. The shoulders were extraordinarily wide, and its head looked exactly like that of a wolf. I started walking backwards, and it started standing up, slow, like it was unrolling its body. I could hear some pops and cracks like someone popping their joints, and that growl, it never stopped the whole time that it was rising. It only seemed to grow in intensity. When it was fully up, it had to be 7.5 feet tall, right around that anyway. I aimed right at its chest and fired a quick burst of 3 rounds. The first 2 hits didn't seem to do much. For some reason, the third one made it jerk back. It let out a noise that sounded like a howl in a way, but it wasn't pain. It sounded mad. It turned toward the trees and backed up a few steps. It was still watching me, still growling. It spun around and ran off into the woods so fast I could hardly track it with the light. I stood there listening, waiting to get another shot, but after a few seconds everything went quiet. No leaves moving, no brush being broke. It was just dead quiet. I didn't know if it had actually left or if it stopped inside the trees and was watching me from a distance. I stayed there on alert for a few minutes. Then I finally made my way down to the calf. It was still warm, but there wasn't much left. Its whole rib cage was torn open like something had reached in and scooped all the insides out. The ground around it was torn up like something heavy had been kneeling there for quite some time. I went back to the house and told Grandma it was gone. She was crying, saying she heard the shots but didn't know if I was still alive. I stayed the night just in case it came back, but it never did. We buried what was left of the calf the next day. I looked around the fence line for prints, but the ground was too hard in most places. I did see one spot near the gate where the grass was pressed down like something heavy had knelt or crouched there. Maybe that's the spot where it sat and watched and waited to ambush the calf. Who the hell knows? For a while after that, things were quiet, but every few months she'd lose another animal. Not torn up, just disappeared, gone. A chicken, a goat, another calf, always one at a time. Never any tracks, just missing. It's been a few years now, and she's still out there. I go by more often these days, and I always keep that rifle handy when I do. I'll catch myself at times looking down toward that same spot in the pasture that night. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. But I can feel it. There's this feeling that it's out there. Maybe it's just a normal predator picking them off, who knows? Or maybe it's the same one, still taking payment for its pound of flesh that I took that night when I shot it. Anonymous. Hello there. Just know that this is not easy for me to write. I've thought about this night more times than I could ever explain. It still doesn't feel real, no matter how many times I replay it. I've worked around animals my entire life. I've seen hogs tear each other up, I've seen coyotes drag off piglets, and I've dealt with my fair share of predators. But this was something else. Something that I just cannot wrap my head around. It was 2017, and my uncle's property sits just outside of Russellville, Arkansas. He raises hogs and cattle, and I help him out from time to time, mostly evenings after I get off work. It's just routine stuff. Feed, fence check, that sort of thing. We'd just butchered 2 hogs that week, and we had the waste stored in a covered barrel near the back of the property until burn day. The smell tends to draw coyotes in, so we usually check the pens after dark, just in case. It was late fall. I remember that because it was cold enough I could see my breath and the moon wasn't out that night. It was just a black sky and the sound of the hogs in the pens. Around 10:30 I was cleaning up the shed where we scalded them and getting ready to head home when I heard one of the hogs start squealing. Not normal grunting or fussing, but a high-pitched scream. Now, if you've ever heard a hog in pain, you know that sound will stick with you. It's sharp and almost human-like. I dropped what I was doing and grabbed a flashlight, figuring maybe one had gotten tangled in the fencing or maybe a coyote had got inside. When I stepped out there, I heard metal hit metal, the sound of one of the panels collapsing. I ran down the gravel path toward the back pen. All I could hear was the rest of the hogs going nuts. When I got close, the smell hit me as mixture of blood and something else. The panel on the far side of the pen was bent inward like something had rammed it from the outside. One hog was gone completely, and the ground looked like a bomb went off. There was mud, blood, and hoof prints in every direction. I found drag marks leading off toward the trees, real deep ones, and you could see where something heavy had been pulled through the dirt. So I followed it. I had my .45 on my hip, but honestly, I wasn't thinking about needing it. I thought it was just a big dog or maybe a coyote that got lucky. The sound hit me before the light did. This horrible, wet, tearing sound. A low growl that I swear didn't sound like any animal I've ever heard. It was too deep, too steady, like it had a chest the size of a barrel. When I finally caught it in the flashlight, my brain didn't even register what I was looking at for quite a few seconds. It was slumped down, its back was toward me, and it had a big hog underneath it. The hog was still kicking, weak, making these awful choking squeals. Whatever this thing was, it had hands. It was pulling chunks out and eating while the animal was still alive. When my light hit its back, it stopped, and I could see its breath. It was taking long, steady, slow breaths. Its shoulders, I watched them rise and fall. All of this seems to play in slow motion when I think back on it. The fur was short, dark, almost oily looking. I could see its spine moving under the skin. That's the point where it turned its head, and that's the point that changed my life. I saw one eye at first. No shine, no reflection, just black. It twisted the rest of the way around. Its face looked like a wolf, but much bigger. Its teeth looked too big for its mouth. I don't know if it had been eating so long that it was coated in blood, but its muzzle and chest were dark and wet. I could see steam coming off it in the cold air. It stood up, slowly, like it wasn't afraid of me at all. I remember how long this thing's legs and arms were. One hand was still holding something. Maybe the hog's intestines, I couldn't really tell. It let them drop to the ground with this wet slap. That's when it made a sound that just, to me, in my opinion, does not belong in this world. It was a roar mixed with something that just was not normal. I can't even describe it in words or even imitate it. It didn't echo, it just hit me in the chest like pressure. I stumbled back and almost dropped my light. I drew my pistol and fired twice. Both shots hit. I could tell from the way that it moved its shoulders and sighed. It flinched. I heard it smack. It didn't fall, it just flinched a little and hunched down and let out this deep rumble, like it was about to either stand its ground or retreat. It took a few steps in my direction. Each one was quiet, controlled. I swear I thought that was it. But when it stopped, it stared at me for maybe 3 seconds, tilted its head to its left side, and then it just turned and ran on all fours. This thing, the speed, I can't deny or describe what I saw. Something that big should never be able to move like that. I stood there for a while before I could move again. The hog was still there, or what was left of it. It had been ripped in half, literally torn apart from the middle out. The ribs on one side were broken off clean, like something had pried them open. Was the craziest damn kill sight I've ever seen. When I went back to the house, my uncle decided not to go back out that night. It was too dangerous. But the next morning, we went back down there in the daylight. We found drag marks, blood trails, and prints, big ones. But the hog, what was left of it, was now gone. We fixed the pen and burned the rest of the waste that day. But after that night, things just never went back to normal. The hogs wouldn't go near the back fence at all, even during the daytime. They'd bunch up in the corners, snorting and squealing at nothing. We started finding pieces of bone in the grass behind the shed. Not big bones, fragments like something had been chewing them. About a month later, the dogs started acting weird too. They'd go to the door at night and just growl, staring toward the trees. One night, they wouldn't even go outside to use the bathroom. They just whined and backed away from the door. I myself quit helping out after dark. My uncle still runs the place, but he doesn't stay out late either. He told me once, kind of quiet, that every so often, maybe twice a year, he'll have another hog go missing. No signs, no blood, just a missing pig. He said maybe it's coyotes, maybe. But he doesn't go looking anymore, and neither do I. I wouldn't recommend searching for one of these animals, and I do think they're some type of animal. Thank you, Anonymous. Hi. I'm not used to writing things like this, and on the other hand, who the hell is? I don't post on Facebook much, I don't leave reviews on products, I don't usually tell strangers my business. But I have listened to your channel for quite some time in the evenings when I'm washing up or folding clothes. I keep thinking I should say what happened out here. I don't want any attention, and I don't want people coming around. I just want to tell it and be done. I live out in the Panhandle. Folks around here know the wind better than they know their cousins. We measure our days by when the trash barrel will behave and when it'll try to lift off. My husband passed 4 years ago, and I've kept the place as best I can. It's not a farm like some people run, but just a small house, a shop, a garden, and that gets away from me in July. And a couple sheds my husband built from whatever he could scrounge up. I keep 2 dogs for company. Molly is an older and slow. Duke is middle-aged and too proud for his own good. He's some kind of mixed. Loud bark, good ears. He sleeps under the porch and thinks that's his job. I still burn trash. I know the rules. I watch the wind and keep a hose handy. I've got a ring of rock around the burn pit and a barrel I set over the top when the papers are done curling and it's down to coals. It's not every night, maybe every 3rd night or so, when the bags stack up in the mudroom. That's how my mother did it, and that's how I kept doing it. It was in October, not quite Halloween, but a few days before. It was cold enough that you could smell the dirt more than I could smell anything else, if that makes sense. It was a still night, and it just didn't feel right out there. The wind would pause, and you'd start to notice small sounds that normally you wouldn't notice. They would get lost. I would hear my own boots, the chain on the gate, the little ping when the lid on the barrel gets hot. I took a bag out around 8. I had spaghetti boxes, junk mail, some of those flyers they stuff in the mailboxes, and a few things from cleaning out the fridge. I don't drink, so there wasn't any bottles to pop, just cardboard and food scraps. I dumped it in, drizzled a little diesel like my husband used to, and lit it. It flared and settled, that good steady roar that sounds almost like a highway far off. I stood there with my hands out and let them get warm. It felt good on my fingers. The sky was dark. There were stars. The stars you could only see when the weather's trying to turn. Duke paced along beside the fence. He does that from time to time. He thinks coyotes are a personal insult. Molly lay by the steps and watched me like she always does. I told her to stay. I don't like her close to the fire. She's old and she's not steady. I was out there about 10 minutes, max. I stirred the pit and used an old rebar and put the barrel down to tame it. It makes a soft, hollow sound when it sits right. I turned to go in and heard something move by the shed. It wasn't loud, not a person sound, just a scrape. Then another, like something turned itself sideways to fit between the woodpile and the wall. We have cats. We get skunks and porcupines, and one time javelina though I think it wandered from somewhere it shouldn't have been. I don't panic when I hear noises. You live here long enough and you sort them by how much trouble they'll cause you. I picked up the rebar again and tapped it on the rim of the barrel, loud, the way my husband used to clear raccoons. The scraping sound stopped. Then I heard another sound farther back, near the tank. A splash. Not a big one, more like when somebody tosses a bucket in and pulls it out quickly. It bothered me because the tank's low and there shouldn't have been much water to splash. I reached for my flashlight I keep on the hook by the back door, and didn't find it. I had set it in the kitchen that morning when I was checking the breaker. I said a word my husband wouldn't like and called for Duke. He came right over, his tail up, looking in the direction of the tank. He did that low growl, the one I feel in my feet. His hair stood up, not just along his neck, but all along his back. I don't see that very often. I figured there might be some coyotes. The barrel draws them in sometimes. They come for bones or whatever scraps they can nose out once the heat's down. I don't leave it unattended long for that reason. I thought maybe it smelled of spaghetti and got brave. I walked to the porch to get the light, and that's when Duke took off. He barked once, and then it turned into another sound, like he ran out of air and was still trying to bark. He charged into the dark behind the shop. All I could see was his back end for a second and then nothing. I yelled his name. Molly stood up and she barked once and then sat back down and started whining. I hate that sound from her. It's the same sound she made when my husband didn't come home. I grabbed the light and an old single shot my husband kept behind the door. It's an old 20 gauge. He used it for snakes and the occasional skunk under the shed. It's not much. My hands didn't shake, but I could feel the blood run up into my face and then drain down to my feet. I walked pretty fast across the yard, past the barrel, past the clothesline, toward the shop. I kept calling Duke like that would make him answer me. I don't know why people do that. Maybe it's to hear our own voices so we don't have to hear the other sounds. When I got to the corner of the shop, I stopped and held the light up. The beam showed the ruts in the dirt and the little tufts of grass that somehow kept living out here. It showed the side of the tank and the pipe my husband put in with 2 hose clamps because he always said one would let you down the day that you couldn't spare it. It showed the woodpile, stacked sloppy like I did it because I did. It showed the ground under the woodpile was wrong. It looked like something had scooped it out. The smell reached me then. I've smelled things turn. I've had to scoop dead mice out of the trap that got left too long. This was different. It was like meat and wet dog and that sharp stink you get when hair burns. The burn barrel hit it some, but then the wind shifted just enough to give it to me full. I heard a scrape again and swung the light past the tank toward the fence. That's when I saw it for the first time. Not all of it, a piece of it. A shape next to the fence post, low like it was crouched down, and 2 long arms set out in front of it. I thought they were 2 pieces of pipe at first. My brain did that stupid thing where it tries to turn it into something you know. Then one of them bent in the middle like an elbow, and I saw that hand. I'm calling it a hand because it looked like one even though it wasn't normal. The fingers were too long. The light showed pale skin there with hair stuck to it, matted down like it had been wet. It pulled its hand back in towards its body. That's when Duke made a sound I didn't know he could make. It was under the deck of the old flatbed. He was trying to get to it from the other side. He lunged, hit the metal, backed up, and lunged again. The thing turned its head in that direction, and that's when I saw its face. If you told me to draw a wolf, I'd draw something like that. But there's a difference when it's not a drawing. The mouth was longer. The teeth were too thick at the base. The eyes didn't take light like regular eyes. They didn't shine. They were just dark in a way, like the light hit them and then died. It let the breath out slow. I could hear it. It turned back to the woodpile and reached in. Then it dragged something out by the hind leg. I thought it had gotten one of the feral cats. There are a few that live on mice and stubbornness. Then I saw the ear. It was Duke's ear. It was black and folded the way he does when he's running and the wind catches it. The thing pulled him out like he didn't weigh anything. Duke tried to get to his feet under him, and it set one hand on his side and pushed him down. The whole time it didn't hurry. That bothered me more than if it had jumped. It acted like it knew nothing could stop it. I shot then. It wasn't a plan, it was a reflex. The sound was loud in that space. The barrel flash lit the side of the tank, and I smelled powder and then my own breath coming fast. The creature jerked and looked right at me. It didn't leap or come after me. It made a sound like it was pissed off at being interrupted. It wasn't a scream. It was more like a noise deep from the chest that vibrated the metal under Duke. It put its hand over Duke's head like it meant to cover his muzzle. Then it slid that hand to his mouth and pulled his jaw open like a person would. I heard the pop. I can't forget the sound. It happened so quick. The way you break a chicken's neck when you've done it too many times to hesitate. I yelled and put in another shell. The light showed the creature's chest move. I think I hit it. I don't know where. It let go of Duke and set its hand down on the ground. The hand made a print like a starfish, long points and deep where the ends dug in the dirt. It stood up in a slow way that made me feel sick because I could see how much of it I hadn't seen yet. It kept rising, and I realized my light was on its stomach and then its chest, and then under its chin before I tilted it up. I shot again. It flinched and took one step back. It didn't fall, it didn't cry out in pain, it just moved away from me and to the side where the shadows from the shop and the tank met, and then it wasn't there anymore. I kept the light on that dark place until my hand started to hurt. I listened for it to circle or come from behind me. I didn't hear anything. I heard Molly on the porch, nails on the wood pacing and whining. I heard the barrel make that hollow sound when a piece of wood inside shifts. I didn't hear the thing move. It was like it hadn't been there, and then it wasn't there. I went to Duke. He was breathing. He wasn't making any sound. His lower jaw hung wrong, and there was blood on the boards and on his chest. I said his name, and he blinked slow and tried to wag. It made me mad in a way that doesn't have words because he was trying to be good while he was broken. I picked up his front end and dragged him out carefully and told him we were going. He tried to stand, but he couldn't. I don't know how long I stayed out there with the gun in one hand and the light in the other, long enough that the wind came back in little pushes and the barrel hissed when it caught. I got him into the truck by myself and drove the road into town, crooked because I kept looking in the mirror at the dark behind us. The vet met me at the door because I called from the highway. He did what he could. He said the jaw was cracked in 2 places and something had torn the soft tissue. He asked me how it happened. I told him the truth, and then I told him I didn't want to talk about it again. He just nodded. I think he believed me. Out here you see strange things come off the prairie that don't have any easy names. Duke did live. He eats soft food now and doesn't patrol the fence anymore. He sleeps inside. Molly doesn't go out after dark at all, and neither do I. Not to the burn pit. I burn in the daylight if I burn at all. I started hauling bags to the dump every other week and paying the man to take them. I don't care if the neighbors think I've gone soft. I keep that old 20 gauge by the door and another in the bedroom. My son wanted to bring me a bigger gun and sit outside a few nights and wait. I told him no. I told him nothing good waits out there. There's more I should say. The night after it happened, I found small prints by the tank. Not coyote, not feral cats. They were narrow and long and didn't make sense for a person because of where the weight landed. I set a cinder block there, and the next morning it was tipped on its edge, and I know I didn't tip it. I have the strength, but not that kind. Not from that angle. People in town talk around things. They'll say something got into the chickens, and nobody asks what the something is, because if you name it, then you've got to decide what you're going to do about it. I don't want to do anything about it. I want it to pass through and forget that I'm here. It hasn't taken anything since. It hasn't shown itself either. Sometimes I think I can smell that wet dog and burned hair smell again. It's faint, like it's downwind somewhere. I'll shut the door and pray the wind picks up and takes it away. I know this isn't the kind of story that ends with a picture or a cast of a track. I didn't think to take any of that. I was busy trying to keep a dog alive and not get my own face torn off. I can tell you what I saw and what I heard and how it moved. I can tell you the way its hand felt, printed into the dirt, too long and too heavy, like a person's hand that didn't know it was supposed to be a paw. I can tell you that when I shot it, it acted angry, not scared. That bothered me then, and it bothers me now. I used to like those quiet evenings by the barrel with my hands out to the heat, thinking about nothing in particular. I don't like the quiet anymore. The quiet feels like a thing that's listening. That's all I've got. Thanks, Reels. M. Hey, man. I've gone back and forth with this, and I don't want to drag my dad into anything he doesn't want to be involved. He's not the type of person to talk about anything like this, but I figure it's time someone else hears it besides me. Maybe you or someone else can make sense of what we saw. We live in northern Minnesota, about an hour south of the border. My dad's been butchering deer and livestock his whole life. He's an old-school guy that thinks everything should be done by hand and done right. He built a big wooden shed out back with a rail, hooks, drain trough, and a cooler he made out of an old walk-in refrigerator he found from a diner that closed down. We've processed hundreds of deer and a few pigs out there. This happened during deer season 2 years ago. We had 3 bucks hanging overnight, skinned and ready to cut up the next morning. The temperature had dropped enough that we didn't need to worry about spoilage. Everything was fine when we went to bed. When we walked out there the next morning, one of the deer was missing, completely gone. The hook was still swinging and the chain was stretched tight like something yanked it clean off. There was blood on the floor, smeared like something had dragged it. The 2 of the butcher's knives were on the ground by the door. Dad got quiet when he saw it. He doesn't spook easily, but I could tell right away something was off. He told me to go inside and grab the rifle and walk the fence line while he checked around the shed. I made it maybe 50 yards before he yelled for me to come back. He was standing by the side of the shed looking down. The grass was matted and there was a clear drag trail leading into the trees. The weird thing was you could see boot prints, ours, but alongside them there were these long impressions. They weren't paw prints like a dog or coyote, they were long and narrow, almost human-like. But they had toes, and what looked like on the ends of those toes were punctures at the front, like whatever it was had sharp claws. Dad said it had to be a bear. I didn't believe that, and he didn't either. When you see something that you can't explain and it isn't supposed to be real, it's kind of hard to come to terms with. We were trying to avoid it completely. We followed the drag trail quite a ways into the woods before it just stopped. The blood stopped, too. The deer wasn't there was no bones, no blood, nothing, just extremely quiet all around us. That night, Dad decided we'd stay out in the shed to catch whatever or whoever it was. He wasn't about to lose another deer. I wasn't thrilled, but I wasn't going to let him sit out there alone either. So we set up 2 chairs by the cutting table, kept the lights off, and cracked the door just enough to watch the clearing. It was sometime around midnight the dogs started barking from the house. They suddenly stopped, and that's when I heard movement. These heavy, slow steps out by the trees. The air got completely still, like even the wind shut up to listen. We sat there for about 30 seconds before we saw something move between the trees. It was tall enough that its shoulders showed above the brush, and it was walking upright. The porch light from the house hit it just enough that I could see fur. It appeared to be dark brown or maybe black, and it had what looked to me like a muzzle. It didn't come straight toward the shed, it circled wide, keeping to the shadows like it knew we were there. This was definitely a predatory animal. Every time it moved, you could hear a low rumble. It was like it was breathing heavy on purpose, letting us know it wasn't scared, and it was coming. Dad whispered for me to stay quiet, and I could hear him clicking the safety off his .30-06. I had my shotgun in my lap. My hands were sweating even though it was below freezing. We listened as it came closer to the shed, still circling. I heard it bump something metal behind the cooler, and then the sound of claws scraping wood. The cooler wall made a dull creak, like pressure pushing from the outside. Dad stood up very slowly and pointed the rifle at the back wall. We both stood still as statues when the motion light by the chicken coop came on. That's when we both saw it. It was standing halfway in the open, one hand on the corner post. This thing was massive. I don't know how to describe it other than a man built wrong. It had the shape of a person, but the head was that of a timber wolf or a dog. Its head was just too big. Its ears stuck straight up, and they were too tall. This thing was a monster. The mouth was open just a little, and I could see teeth, even from that distance. Long ones that did not match the jawline. It had arms that hung low, and fingers longer than any person's hands would ever be. The thing was hunched like it wasn't used to standing straight up. Dad immediately fired. The muzzle flash lit the shed, and I watched the thing bolt backwards, but it didn't fall down. It staggered and let out a noise that shook the air like a scream and a roar together. Then it charged. It hit the side of the shed so hard it knocked tools off the wall. The cooler door slammed open and something metal snapped. I shot through the wall 3 times just trying to get it to stop. It didn't break through, but it circled the shed again, faster this time. Ticked off. The footsteps were heavy, moving around us like a bear pacing a cage. I remember Dad screaming at me, "Keep the light on it." But every time I tried, it was already somewhere else. I saw flashes of it through the cracks, fur movement, claws scraping the boards. Then it stopped, just outside the door. Everything went quiet again. I could hear my own heartbeat. Then a hand reached through the opening. Black fur, long fingers, and it had claws that looked wet. It gripped the edge of the door and pulled down, slow and steady, bending the hinges like they were made out of paper. Dad shot again, point blank, through the door. The shot blew splinters all over the place, and the thing let out that sound again, deeper this time, more angry. It backed off just long enough for Dad to slam the door shut and drop the beam across it. For a few minutes all we heard was it moving around outside, growling, crunching in the snow. Then, out of nowhere, everything went quiet again. We waited, guns still up, afraid to even breathe. Then the smell hit, a metallic, rotten, like wet animal fur and blood. It seeped through the boards and made my stomach hurt. After a while, it was gone. There was no sound, no smell. We stayed in that shed till morning. Neither of us slept. When daylight came, we opened the door and went outside. Those same impressions from before, big. They went from the door to the trees and disappeared just like before. The cooler door was bent, and the back wall had deep scratches in it like something was trying to claw its way inside. There was blood smeared across the boards, not much, but we followed the prints a little ways, and they ended where the woods got too thick to follow. That day, Dad welded metal braces onto the doors and installed bars across the windows. He doesn't butcher at nighttime anymore. He doesn't talk about this either. I mean, he'll get extremely angry if you even bring it up. Although the next time we processed a deer, we noticed something strange. Every time we start cutting, the dogs would start barking toward the woods. Not the house, not the road, just the same spot out back, like they knew it was out there. A few weeks passed, and a neighbor 2 miles down told us he lost a cow. Said it looked like it had been opened up from the middle out, no tracks, no drag marks, just dead in the pasture and left there. Nothing had took any bites out of it. It was just basically cold-blooded murder for no reason. Killed for sport. Dad looked at me when he said that, and I knew we were thinking the same thing. Now every time I walk into that shed, even in the daytime, I look at that back wall first. The scratches are still there, under the paint. I keep the shotgun hanging right by the door. Reels, whatever these dogmen are, they're not scared of us. They seem to be more curious than anything. And that fact alone scares me worse than anything else. Thanks for what you do. Jay. Reels. I have thought about writing this to multiple different channels for years, but I always end up not doing it. I guess because it's very weird. Every time I start typing, it feels like I'm admitting that it really happened. But it did, and I can't keep pretending it was something normal. Our family had some property along the Edisto River in South Carolina back in 2014. My uncle passed away in 2019, so I figured it's safe to tell this now. He had a little lot right near the water, just a couple of miles outside of Branchville. We used it for fishing and camping. There was an old shed with a tin roof, a picnic table, and a dock that had seen better days. No electricity, no running water, just trees, frogs, and the river. This is just a place you go when you want to clear your head. I used to spend whole weekends down there alone, no problem. That weekend, I was supposed to meet a buddy to do some catfishing, but he backed out last minute. I decided to go anyway. I took my John boat, a cooler, a lantern, and my grandpa's old tackle box. I got there just before dark. The air was heavy. It felt like it was going to rain, but the forecast said clear. I remember the sound of crickets and frogs being so loud it almost echoed. I thought about camping out, but figured I'd fish till midnight or so and then go back home. By the time it got dark, the fog had started to roll in off the water. It's normal for that area, that river especially. You'll get this low mist that clings to the surface of the water. It was so thick that night that I could barely see 10 feet out. The lantern light just hit the fog and bounced back at me. I was sitting on the dock, a beer in one hand, rod in the other, when the line went slack. I reeled it in. Nothing. Then I heard a splash downstream, maybe 20 or 30 yards away. It sounded like a big fish jumped or something dropped in. But then I heard another splash. Slower this time, like someone wading in the water. It wasn't unusual for people to come through the river from other properties, so I yelled out, "Hey, somebody down there?" No answer. Then another splash. It was closer to me this time. The sound of water moving like footsteps. I turned off the lantern for a second to let my eyes adjust to the dark. The fog was moving in a weird way. It wasn't drifting, it was shifting, like something big was passing through it. I leaned forward and squinted a bit and spotted movement in the water. It was something tall. I would guess it was over 6 feet for sure. It was standing chest deep about 15 yards out. It looked like a person wearing a wetsuit or a pair of waders, but there was no boat, no light, and no sound of paddling. I called out a second time and asked if you're okay out there. Still no answer, so I just stood there, puzzled. I grabbed the flashlight from the cooler and turned it on. The light hit the water and lit up the fog like milk. When it finally cut through, I saw it clearly, and I dropped the flashlight. It wasn't a man. It was something else. His chest and shoulders were huge and thick muscles, covered in dark, wet fur that looked like it was stuck to leathery, cracked skin. The head was like a dog or a wolf. The snout came out past the neck and the ears were pointed straight up. The snout came out past the neck. The ears were pointed straight up. It wasn't hunched or crouched down, it was standing upright. Arms swaying at its sides, hands just below the waterline. For a second, it just stood there. It didn't move at all. It just stared at me. The eyes didn't glow. They just had a dull amber graze to them. Then it turned its head slowly, like it was trying to figure me out, like it was studying me, or it was debating whether it was going to come after me or not. It's hard to say. I took a step back on the dock and a board creaked under my boot. That sound, for some reason, set it off because it dropped down lower into the water until only its shoulders and head were above the surface. Then it started moving toward me. I don't mean it was swimming either. This thing was walking. I could see the water rippling around its chest, each step making this deep splash that echoed through the fog. I had a .357 in my tackle box, but I couldn't move to grab it. All I could do was stare at this monster, trying to figure out what was happening, if I was dreaming, if this was real. But it kept coming until it was less than 20 feet away. Then it stopped again. I was hit with a smell. Fish. Something sour like old blood mixed with a wet dog. It made me gag. It lifted one arm out of the water and it had a hand. A hand with long black claws at the ends of the fingers. It just stood there, half submerged, breathing heavy enough that I could hear it over the frogs. Then it bent forward and dunked its head under the water. At first it looked like it was about to go dive, but it came back up, and when it stared at me again, I swear it smiled at me. And that's when I snapped out of whatever I was in. I backed up quickly, almost tripped over all my stuff, and I ran for the shed. I slammed the door shut and dropped the latch. The tin roof was still vibrating after I slammed the door. I could hear the river moving outside like nothing was happening. I stood there for probably 5 or 10 minutes, holding my pistol. I heard it again, that slow waiting sound moving along the edge of the water. It sounded like it was circling. It stopped somewhere behind the shed, maybe 20 yards away from me. Then there was a splash, a lot louder this time, and it was followed by silence. I stayed awake all night watching that door with my gun. I waited until I saw the gray light of morning through the cracks in the door, packed my stuff, and left. When I came back a few days later with my uncle, the dock was demolished. One of the boards was split right down the middle like something heavy had stepped on it and busted through. There were, I won't call them prints, but there was mud where something had walked on it too. They looked, from what I could see, long and three-toed and deep claw marks ahead of them, even in the wood. My uncle knew something. He didn't say much. He just looked at me, looked at the river, and said, "We're not staying here another night. Ever." He sold the property the following spring. I haven't been back to that river after that, but I do still fish every chance I get, just not anywhere near the water after dark. Sometimes when I clean fish at the house, I'll be reminded of that smell again. That same mix of river mud and blood and wet fur. It makes me sick every single time. I know what I saw. I don't care what people call it. It stood up in that river and looked right at me. T. Real Adventures. I wasn't completely sure that I wanted to send this, but I have seen a few uploads where you take more darker, graphic stories sometimes. This might fit. What happened to me and my brother was bad enough that we both stopped keeping animals for a long time. This was near Garnett, Kansas, about 5 years ago. My family has owned this land for a very long time. My grandparents raised dairy cows here back in the day. When they got too old to run it, my brother took over, and I helped part-time. It's about 50 acres, most of it fenced pasture and timberline on the north side. There's one old barn way out back, built way before my time. We still called it the old barn, even though there's a newer one closer to the house. The old one's where we'd store hay or use it to separate a sick cow. No one liked going in there much. The boards would crack and pop even when there's no wind. The smell never really leaves, that mix of dust, rot, and dried manure. Anyway, that fall, something started messing with our cattle. Every few nights we'd find a section of fence down or a post leaned over. A couple of calves got spooked bad enough they wouldn't feed. One morning we found a cow dead near the creek, belly torn open, ribs broken like kindling. Coyotes can't do that. Whatever it was didn't eat much of it. It was more like it tore it up for fun. All we could assume, obviously, was maybe a mountain lion, even though you almost never see those here. My brother set some trail cameras along the fence line and by the feed bins. We didn't catch anything but shadows and raccoons. One afternoon that November, we got that smell again. Thick, sweet, and rotten. You could smell it from the driveway. My brother said he thought something crawled under the barn and died. We took some lights and walked down there before the sun went down. The closer we got, the worse it got. That heavy metallic stink that makes the back of your throat sting. The barn door was cracked open a few inches, and there were flies thick on the inside, even though it had been cold for days. When we opened the door, I damn near fainted. One of our cows was hanging from the center beam, tied by its hind legs with baling wire. The front half of it had been stripped down, ribs showing, head twisted sideways like it had been turned too far. The eyes were completely gone. The floor under it was soaked through, and the dirt looked churned like something had been moving around in it. There were claw marks on the posts, deep, clean gouges that went up higher than I could reach. 9 feet. Had to be. Maybe higher. My brother started swearing, yelling, and saying somebody was messing around with us. He thought maybe some nutcase was out there on the loose. But then he pointed at the wire. It wasn't cut or knotted the way a person would do it. It was twisted tight like something strong did it by hand. We stepped inside just far enough to see the rest. There were pieces of hay stuck to the walls like something had been flinging it. A pile of organs lay on an old tarp in the corner, stacked neat like they'd been set there. That's when we started hearing a sound from the loft above us. Slow creaking, like boards shifting under something heavy. My brother whispered to me that there's someone up there. I looked at the ladder. It was old and half rotted. I was about to tell him we'd come back with the sheriff when another sound came. Not a step, but a growl. It was so deep it made the nails in the wall buzz. I'll never forget it. Then something moved up there. A heavy shape. Scraping along the boards, we saw dust fall from the cracks. My brother turned his light toward the loft, and for a second we both caught a glimpse of it. A long arm reaching down through the gap between the boards. The hand looked human at first until you saw the claws, long, curved. It flexed once like it was testing the air, then pulled back up out of sight. We ran. Neither of us said anything till we were halfway to the house. My brother grabbed the rifle off the wall and called the sheriff. They came out and looked around that night, but they didn't find anything except what we already told them about. The cow, the claw marks, the smell. They said it was a bear. A bear doesn't hang a cow up by its hind legs. Now, come on. They had us cut it down and bury it. Told us to keep the barn locked and not go back in until they could have a wildlife guy take a look. Nobody ever showed up. Well, not that we saw, anyway. A few nights after that, the dogs started barking around midnight. We looked out the back window and saw the floodlight on the pole flickering, like something big was moving in front of it. My brother said, "It's back." He grabbed the rifle and I grabbed the shotgun. We went out together, moving slowly. The air was cold. The smell hit us again, halfway down the hill. The barn door was wide open. I remember that clearly because the wind was pushing it back and forth, and it made that slow moaning sound that old hinges make. The light over the door was out. We stopped a few yards away trying to listen over the dogs barking behind us. We did hear it. There was movement inside. It wasn't fast. It was slow. Something moving around, quietly, like it was dragging something across the floor. My brother, I'll never forget, said, "It's eating." Now, what made him think that, I don't know, because I heard the same sounds and nothing I heard told me something's in there eating. He aimed the rifle and I held the light. I was shaking, but I managed to hold the beam steady. It danced across the wall until it landed on something standing inside the doorway. This friggin' thing was taller than the doorframe itself. It had the duct to clear it. It's a good 9-10 feet. The shoulders were huge. Its fur looked to be splotchy or bald in some areas. It looked like on certain parts its chest and stomach area it had mud or blood on it. It was hard to tell in that flashlight. The head was canine, long snout, upright ears, but the body moved like a human. It stepped out, one arm hanging down, the other holding something we couldn't see at first. Then I realized it was holding part of the cow that we'd buried. It looked right at us, dropped the piece of meat. The sound it made when it hit the ground was something I can't forget. My brother shot first. The rifle cracked off and the flash lit its face for a split second. I can close my eyes now and see that face. I saw teeth and yellow eyes. The thing lurched back and disappeared inside behind the door. We heard it hit the wall inside, then everything went silent. We stood there 20 to 30 seconds, then I yelled out, "Did you hit it?" Before he could answer, it hit the side of the barn from the inside. It was a crash so loud the whole thing shook. I heard boards break and part of the siding peeled back. I fired the shotgun at the opening and we both backed toward the fence. Then it stopped. Nothing. Just the sound of us breathing. After that, we didn't go back down there until daylight. The side of the barn was torn open. The boards were pushed in, broken, like something forced its way through from the inside to get out. There was blood on the wall, not a lot, but enough you could see splatters, and there was a trail leading into the trees. We'd already seen all we needed to see of this creature, so we didn't dare follow it. We sealed up the barn that same day. We put sheet metal over the hole, bolted the doors shut permanently. We didn't even bother with the trail cams anymore. My brother said he'd seen enough, and I agreed. That was 5 years ago. Since then, we still lose a cow or two every winter. No sign of Hal. Sometimes we hear noises out by the old barn. Knocks, scraping, what sounds like something moving hay around. The dogs won't go near it. I told my brother once maybe we should burn it down and be done with it. He said no, just let it have it. He never explained what he meant by that. I didn't ask. We just don't go near it anymore. Not after dark. Not ever. It's just safer that way. Thanks for your time. I hope this helps someone. R. Reels. I don't want to draw any unnecessary attention, and I'm not going to do this to scare anyone. I just want people to understand that not all of these stories are make-believe. And I also want to tell it to someone who might actually listen without laughing halfway through. It was only last winter. Out near Princeton, Kentucky, my mother had just gotten out of the hospital after a hip replacement. I came down from Bowling Green to stay a few nights and help her get around. The old house we grew up in is still standing. 1-story, tin roof, sits back from the main road with woods on 3 sides. It was the first night she'd been home. We had dinner early and she went to bed around 8. I stayed up in the living room watching TV with the sound low so she could sleep. Around 9:30 I heard a thump come from outside like something heavy hit the porch. I muted the TV and listened. It was quiet. Then I heard something else. Another sound, but this time it was above me. The roof was popping and cracking the way it does when somebody's walking on it. You can tell when it's an animal. Squirrels make little light scurries, raccoons shuffle. This was different. Each step was solid, heavy, spaced out, heavy enough to pop the nails a little. I stood up and turned the TV off. Everything went quiet except for the sound. the footfalls moving from one end of the house to the other. I thought someone was trying to break in through the attic vent. I grabbed the flashlight from the kitchen drawer and eased out the back door. The cold hit me right away. The yard was dead quiet and empty. I aimed the light along the roof but couldn't see anything from the angle. I could clearly hear something moving up there, so I stepped back to get a better look. A better look is exactly what I got. I saw something move past the chimney. For a second, it was silhouetted against the moonlight. It was down low, one hand gripping the edge of the roof for balance. This thing was big, broader than any person. It was covered in hair or fur that caught the light just enough to show texture. The head was long, narrow. It turned slightly, and I saw the pointed ears and the curve of a snout. It definitely was not human. It was some sort of canine. I was holding that flashlight with a death grip, but I didn't dare point it at that thing. I thought maybe if I didn't draw attention, it would just leave. I eased my way back toward the door, keeping my eyes on that shape. It moved again toward the far end of the roof, right above my mother's bedroom. I felt my stomach drop into my toes. I ran back inside and down the hallway. Her room was dark, except for the lamp on the nightstand. She was asleep. I went to the window and pulled the curtain just enough to look out. The roof outside her room slopes low, and part of it reflects in the glass from the security light on the pole. I saw a shadow pass across that reflection. Broad shoulders, head bent forward, then I heard it. 3 slow steps on the middle, each one groaning under this thing's massive weight. I didn't want to wake her up. I just stood there, listening. I heard something that had to be claws scraping on the tin. It was followed by the soft drag of something heavy. Then it stopped. The silence that followed up the sounds was worse than the sounds themselves. I waited, counting seconds in my head, until I heard the faintest tap against the window. It wasn't a knock, more like a nail brushing the glass. Once, twice, then silence again. I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't believe what was happening. I stepped back and aimed the light, ready to pull the curtain open and shine it straight into its face if I had to. Before I did, the roof creaked again and the shadow moved away. I ran to the front room. Through the side window, I saw it for the last time. It was standing upright at the peak of the roof, half lit by the moon. It turned its head toward the trees and then dropped out of sight behind the house. I heard the crunch of leaves as it landed. Then I heard nothing. I stayed up, and I had every light in the house on. At sunrise, I went outside. There were what looked like muddy handprints on the edge where it had gripped to pull itself up, or that's what I assume happened. Each one was almost twice the size of mine. The section above my mom's window had some scratches on the tin, long and even scratches, like something had stood there and maybe crouched, holding on with both hands. I didn't tell her. I could never say a word. She wouldn't have been able to handle it anyway. That night changed how I think about the woods out here. I used to feel safe on this land. Now every sound outside after dark makes me tense up. I still come down to visit her, but I sleep in the front room now, away from that side of the house. I don't know what it wanted, but I do know this much. It wasn't looking for a way in. It was watching, and the thought that it was standing right over my mother's bed while she slept still gives me nightmares to this day. Someone please, let's find out what these things are. and what we could possibly do to keep them away from us and our loved ones. C. Hello, Reels. All of this craziness happened October 29th of 2024, only last year. It was on the edge of our little town in Ohio. I'm not giving the exact town because I still work here, and people know me very well. It wasn't way out in the sticks like some of these encounters I've heard. This was right at the city limits sign, where the neighborhoods give way to a strip of light industrial stuff, storage units, a landscaping yard. Then after that, it turns to fields and a couple patchy little woods. I was coming home from a Halloween party at my cousin's place. It was mostly just family, chili, kids, and cheap costumes. I left early because I had the morning shift. I hadn't been drinking. I had 2 plastic cups of apple cider, and that was it. It was around 11:30 when I got to the 4-way by the Speedway. From there, I usually cut down Wilcox, then right on Harding. And that takes me past the storage place and the landscaping yard, then back into my neighborhood. The town had their orange pumpkins hanging off a couple of the light poles. There were still a few cars moving around. I remember one squad car rolled past, heading the other way. I turned onto Harding and hit about 35. There's a sidewalk on the right, with those little square patches of grass and a bus stop bench. Then the sidewalk ends a few blocks down there where the road widens. I got maybe 2 blocks before I saw something up ahead near the mouth of the storage unit's drive. At first, I thought it looked like it was just 2 guys standing near a U-Haul because I could see shape and height. Not detail. Not yet. Then one of them moved across the road in like 3 steps, and I realized it was not 2 people. It was one tall thing, and behind it, the U-Haul truck. I slowed down because I did not want to hit whatever was out there. It stepped up onto the curb and stood next to the bus stop bench like it had picked that spot on purpose. I eased into the middle of the lane and my headlights hit it straight on. That's when it clicked, what I was looking at. It had a dog's head, not a mask, not a costume head bobbling around. The ears were up and pointed. They didn't wobble. The snout stuck out farther than a person's face could if it was a mask, and it opened its mouth a little when the light hit it. I saw teeth. I could literally see inside of its mouth, the tongue, the back of the throat. This was not a mask. This was not a Halloween decoration. This is something that did not have big fake Halloween fangs. More like it had too many teeth for how narrow the snout was. The eyes caught my headlights as well, like an animal's would, and for a second, they looked almost gold. Every single fiber of my being said to keep moving, but I slowed down anyway because it was just standing there watching the truck approach, like it wanted to make sure I saw it. I was not alone on that road either. There was a car 2 blocks behind me, and another coming from the other direction. The street lights were on. This wasn't some dark back road. I rolled by at maybe 25. The thing just turned its head and watched me like a dog that was listening for a whistle. It didn't back away from the curb. It didn't move at all. It wanted that full look. I passed close enough that if a person was standing there, I could have seen the grain of their jacket fiber. This was not fabric. It was hair. The hair lay close along the arms and shoulders like a short coat, darker along the back. The arms were too long for a person as well. They hung with the elbows lower than where a normal person's would fall. The hands were the part that stuck with me the most later on. This thing did not have paws, not like an animal. It was sporting a set of hands like me or you would have. I saw the finger shapes when it shifted and set one down on the edge of the bench like it was balancing itself, and I caught a glimpse of dark nails. When I got up even with it, it turned with me, slowly. This thing was not spooked at all. It wanted that last look, and it took it. I made it past it without panicking, but I was close. I remember I kept telling myself out loud, keep going, don't slam on the brakes, do not act crazy. I checked the mirror. The car behind me braked a little and moved toward the center line like the driver didn't want to pass close. The one coming toward us flashed its brights once and then kept going. No horn, no screeching. Like they saw it and their brain did the same math that mine did. Just get past this thing, whatever it is. I felt a small bit of relief even though my mind was melting trying to figure out what I just witnessed. I thought that was it. I figured I'd make the right turn onto the stretch by the landscaping yard and be done with it. At that point in time, I could have easily convinced myself later on that it was just some Halloween thing, but not after what happened next. When I turned, something blurred along the sidewalk next to me. I looked over and for a few seconds it was keeping pace with the truck, just inside the row of little ash trees that were there. It was not at a full run or a sprint, like it was jogging just to stay up with me. It wasn't pushing to attack, just there so I wouldn't miss it. It's like it wanted to make sure that I could not discredit this encounter later on. It's like it wanted to make sure that it done the most damage possible, and it succeeded. I wanted so badly to floor it, but I didn't. There's a weird thing that happens when your body decides it's in danger. You get this tunnel where you do the simple thing right in front of you. Mine was keep the wheel straight, don't hit the curb, don't wreck. The speedometer crept up to 40. It matched me without even looking like it was trying. About halfway down that block, there's a gap where the sidewalk dips for a driveway. It cut across that and hopped the shallow ditch like it wasn't even there, crossed the 2-lane behind my truck, and then I saw it in the left mirror, now moving along the tree line on the opposite side of the road. It wasn't trying to lose me. It was staying visible on purpose. It could have ducked into the dark at any time. It could have made itself disappear, but it didn't. It chose not to. It wanted me to keep seeing it. I hit the light at the corner by the dentist office on yellow and took the right too fast. The truck rolled and the coins in the cup holder went all over the place. When I straightened out, I checked both of my mirrors. It was gone. I didn't stop. I kept going until I saw my neighborhood sign, and then I turned left and went down my street way too hot. I parked crooked and left the truck running while I got the storm door open because my hands just felt numb. Like when your foot falls asleep and you stand up too fast, they were tingling. I still can't really explain that one. My wife asked if I was okay as soon as I stepped in because I guess I looked pretty bad. I told her there was something weird by the storage place, and she said, "Like a coyote?" I said, "No, not like a coyote." And that was all I could get out without sounding like a lunatic. I went back outside and shut off the truck and just stood there listening. You can hear the highway from our house when it's quiet. That night, I swear I could tell which direction the storage place was just by the way my head wanted to turn. I stayed up the majority of the night. I sat in the living room on the couch with the lamp and the TV on. I kept replaying it in my head. Not the teeth, not even the running part. The way it put its hand on that metal bench. People will argue about footprints and hair and all that. I can't argue with what my eyes saw with streetlights and headlights on. Hands shaped, long fingers, dark nails, weight on it like it had done that before. The next morning I drove past the same route on the way to work just to prove to myself that I didn't dream it. It was bright out. The kids were at that bus stop. Someone walking a dog. Totally normal. Seeing all of that there just hours after what I'd seen just gave my spine the coldest shiver. I slowed by the bench. There wasn't any marks or anything, obviously it's metal slats. But now that I knew the exact spot, it bothered me how easy it was to picture it standing there. The same spot where I've probably waited for my wife to get off work a dozen times. A spot where I'm seeing kids waiting for a bus. I thought these monsters were supposed to be in woods, in camping and hiking stories, bothering hunters. Not here. Not in the open in the city like this. I didn't tell anyone at work. I don't need to be the guy who saw a werewolf by the storage units. Later that week, I mentioned to my cousin that someone was wearing a crazy costume in town the night I left his party. He said he didn't see anything on Facebook about that and asked if it was some group doing a prank. I said I didn't know. Here's the part I haven't told anyone, ever. 2 nights later, I took the long way home on purpose, down by the grocery store, adding 5 minutes, just so I didn't have to pass the bench. I told my wife there was construction on Harding. There wasn't. I'm a grown man, and I took the long way because I didn't want to look at that bus stop. That's embarrassing. At least in my mind it is. I've replayed this 100 times since it happened. Every time my brain tries to move it a little farther out of town, make it more like the stories where it's way back in the woods. I can't do it. It happened where it happened, under a streetlight, with 2 other cars nearby, next to a business with cameras on the building and a little metal bench where kids wait for the bus on school days. Now you can decide what you want to call it. I'm not trying to prove anything here. I just know that on October 29th, right at the edge of our city limits, something walked out where people could see it, stood in the open, watched me pass like it was taking the measure of me, and then paced my truck for half a block just to make sure I didn't brush it off as some hallucination. It wanted to be seen, make no mistake, and that's the part that just won't go away. Thank you, Reels. M.R. This second email I actually received only yesterday. Reels. I wasn't real concerned or worried about sharing this, but I just never had the time. Your Halloween upload made me think about everything that happened to me. It still feels too strange to make sense of it. But I don't mind sharing it here with you. And if you so choose, share it on the channel. I'll leave that part totally your decision. Now, just to preface, I live just outside Rockford, Illinois. One of those older neighborhoods that's quiet but not really rural. You can hear the highway at night, but we've got a little creek that runs behind the houses. And there's a patch of woods a few blocks over that backs up to the power lines. My house sits across from an empty lot that used to be another house before it burned down years ago. It's just a patch of tall weeds now with a couple old trees still standing near the back fence. 2 years ago, on Halloween night, I was home by myself handing out candy. My son was with his dad trick-or-treating in another part of town. I was doing the usual. The porch light on, bowl of candy ready, scary music playing low on a Bluetooth speaker just for fun. We always get a pretty good crowd. but it had slowed down by around 8:30 or 9 o'clock. It was one of those perfect Halloween nights. You could see your breath, and there was a thin layer of fog down low, just enough to make the street lights glow, setting the mood perfectly. I was scrolling on my phone between groups of kids, and I remember I'd just put a handful of candy into a pillowcase when I looked up and saw movement across the street. I just thought it was another bunch of kids cutting across the empty lot to get to the next street over. That's when I realized how big this thing was. It was standing upright, but hunched forward slightly. It crossed from behind one tree to the next in about 2 steps. There was no flashlight, no costume glint, no color, just black, tall shape that looked almost too thin for how tall it was. I was rooted to the spot there on my porch, just staring. The porch light didn't reach that far, but the street light behind it did. The moment the light hit, I swear it turned its head directly toward me. Not the way a person would glance. The movement was fast, sharp. It felt aware of me instantly, like it knew that I was looking at it. The first stupid thing that came into my head was that it was somebody in one of those werewolf suits, like a prank. But the second thing that hit me was that it was too tall. I'm 5'4", and this thing had to be over 7 feet, maybe close to 8 feet. Its head almost brushed the lowest branch on the old tree. It stayed still for a few short seconds, like it was seeing if I would move or scream or run. I didn't. I just kept staring. Then as a car turned down the street and its headlights swung across, I saw it clearly enough to know that it wasn't human. The fur, or whatever it was covered in, caught the headlights. You know how animal fur shines a little when a car light hits it? That's exactly what it looked like. The car rolled past pretty slow, probably a parent driving kids home. For just a second, the beams hit it on the face. I saw its eyes. This wasn't some type of mask. This was actual animal eyeshine. It was a yellowish amber color. And what got me more than the eyes was how it didn't even try to hide. This thing just stood there, staring back across the street, like it was proud of being spotted. When the car finally passed and the lights moved on, it moved its position. It stepped out from the tree completely. I could make out its whole outline then. It had these skinny arms that were hanging down. One bent a little at the elbow. The shape was definitely humanoid, but the legs just didn't look right. They bent like a dog's would when it stands on its hind legs. I could see the outline of a tail moving slowly behind it. I should have gone inside, I know that, but I didn't. Something about it didn't feel like immediate danger. It was more like a dare. Like it wanted to see how long I'd keep looking before I blinked or backed up and went inside. I couldn't even feel my heartbeat. It was just this numb calm, like time stood still almost. That lasted possibly a total of 10 seconds. And then I heard footsteps, real ones, coming up the sidewalk beside my house. 2 kids and their dad coming up for candy. I turned toward them, forced a smile, and handed out the candy. And when I looked back, it was gone. Just the thought of this thing out there watching these kids. No one even knowing that it's out there, just oblivious to how much danger they're actually in. I figured maybe it moved farther back into the lot, so I stepped out toward the edge of the porch. The lot was still, but I could hear something faint, like a growl or something raspy way back near the tree line. It wasn't loud enough for the people walking away to notice, but I heard it as clear as day. That was when I finally went inside. I locked the door and turned off the porch light, just hoping that would keep people away. Most of everyone else around had their lights already off, so the people coming on the street were mainly coming to my place. I was hoping that would keep them away. I still peeked through the curtain a couple of times, but there was nothing else. Around 10:30, I sat down on the couch trying to calm down. That's when I noticed something else. The motion light on the side of the house kept going off like something was walking through the yard. I looked once, but I didn't see anything there. I've lived here for 6 years. I never saw anything weird before that night, and I haven't since. But Halloween night now feels a whole lot different. It used to be my favorite time of year. Now every time I turn that porch light on, I catch myself looking toward that empty lot more than I'd like. This thing wasn't trying to hide. That is the part that is certain, and it won't leave my head. I don't understand why it wanted me to see it. It chose me for some reason. It stood right there in the open, under a streetlight, on the one night of the year where everybody would assume it was a costume. This thing was definitely intelligent. That is without question. That's the only reason I think I'm still here to tell it. Anonymous. I guess I'm finally doing this. I'm writing to you about something that happened the morning after Halloween on November 1st of 2018, here in rural Pennsylvania. I live just outside of Mercer, about a mile off Route 62. It's not exactly what people would say is the middle of nowhere, but we don't have any street lights, and when it gets dark out here, it's dark. The night of Halloween itself was pretty normal. I took my nephew trick-or-treating in town, dropped him off with my sister, and got home a little after 10. I left my porch light off since I wasn't handing anything out. I remember thinking how clear the sky was that night. There were stars everywhere, and that cold, damp smell that always rolls in this time of year. Anyway, that's beside the point. The weird thing didn't happen until the next morning. I woke up around 6:30 to the sound of my dog barking his head off out back. He's an older shepherd mix. He never really barks unless there's a reason. At first I figured it was probably a deer or something. They wander through, actually, a lot of animals wander through a lot this time of year. But the way he was barking, quick bursts, deep, his hackles up kind of barking, this told me this was something different. Could be an intruder or someone trespassing. So I threw on a hoodie and went out back. The sun was just starting to come up and there was a heavy fog. The grass was soaked. I called for him and he came running back to the porch, but stopped halfway and just stood there whining. His eyes were fixed on the shed. My shed sits about 30 feet from the trees, with a patch of clearing behind it where the old garden used to be. When I looked at the front of it, I froze. There were long marks across the plywood door, deep, ragged ones that looked like someone took a metal rake and dragged it down 3 or 4 times. Only they weren't straight. Each mark curved a little, and the spacing between them just didn't look like tool marks to me. I walked over and touched one. The wood was splintered, but not old. This was fresh. The top ends of the scratches were about 7 feet up. Now I'm 6'1", and they were way over my head. The ground in front of the shed was torn up too. I didn't see any prints, but you could see where something had been standing. The impressions were pressed into the mud from the rain the night before, so I knew this was something that happened that past night. There was one that almost looked like a foot, but wider and longer than mine by at least half. You could see where the front had dug in deeper, like it was putting most of the weight on the front of its foot. I backed up and scanned the tree line, half expecting to see a bear. But it was quiet. Actually, too quiet for my liking. It was the quiet that feels like the sound got sucked out of the air. I finally got the dog to come inside, but even after I shut the door, he wouldn't stop pacing through the house. He kept going back to the window by the kitchen table and staring toward the shed. A few hours passed and my neighbor stopped by. He's retired, lives one house over, about 200 yards away through the trees. He asked me if I'd heard anything weird during the night. I told him about the shed and his face changed colors instantly. He said his motion light had gone off around 2:30 in the morning, and when he looked out he saw something big moving past his tool trailer on 2 legs, not 4. He was very open about what he saw. He said it was dark, but he caught the shape of it as it went under the security light. He described it as, and I quote, like a man, but thicker, and the head looked different. I asked him what he meant by different, and he said it looked pointed, with ears, like a dog. We both kind of laughed it off at the time. You have to when something like that comes out of your mouth. But when he came over later that day to see the marks, he didn't laugh anymore. He said that's too high for a bear. That's not a bear. That night I kept the floodlight on the backyard, even though I hate wasting electricity. Around midnight, the dog started whining again, low but constant. I looked out, and there was nothing out there, but I swear I felt weird. It's hard to explain the feeling I had. It was a very strong feeling of dread, like something horrible was about to happen. It's like something bad is coming mixed with when you just know someone's outside watching you. That's exactly how it felt. Like being under a spotlight even though I was inside my own home. I went around the house and found the first flashlight I could and cracked the back door just enough to shine it across the yard. For a split second, I caught the reflection of 2 eyes near the shed, the same spot where the marks were. The light bounced off them. They were a yellowish white mixture, and they didn't blink. They didn't move either. It was so still and so tall, actually, I started to wonder if it was even eyes. But it definitely was, and I slammed the door and locked it. The dog was growling so hard he sounded like he was choking. After about 30 seconds, the motion light on the back of the shed came on, the one I rigged to a sensor. It stayed on for maybe a few seconds, then clicked off. Nothing else happened after that. But the next morning, there were no new marks, no tracks. The mud had hardened, and it was like the thing had never been there at all. I never actually saw it move. I just saw those eyes. Just that awareness. It's been a couple years now, and I still can't bring myself to go out back when it's dark. I had the door replaced on the shed, but the marks are still on the side paneling. I told myself I'd sand them out eventually, but I think part of me leaves them there as proof. Not for anyone else, just for myself. I don't know what it was. I never saw it. But it came around after Halloween. After all the noise and the lights and the people were gone. It waited until everything quieted down, and then it made sure I knew it was still there. I guess that's why it left the marks. Hell, I don't know. Maybe it was just ticked off. It's like it wanted to remind me that the masks might come off, but the real things never left. I don't know. As cliche as that sounds, that's just where my mind goes. I hope to hear this, and if not, I thank you anyway. Hello, brother. I've got an encounter for you. I've told it before, and I'll tell it as many times as I need to let everyone know what's actually out there. It was a couple of weeks before Halloween a few years back. I was 17 then, living in a small town in Kansas called Beloit. We're not known for much besides football, harvest season, and the haunted hayride they do every October on Old Route 14. Now, my uncle owns a pumpkin patch out there, and every year he turns one of his trails into a haunted hayride. It's just a tractor, flatbed trailer with hay bales, some kids in costumes hiding behind trees, some cheap masks, and some strobe lights. It's nothing extravagant, but the locals love it. I'd worked it for 2 years in a row, and that fall I was helping again, running one of the jump scare spots. It was the night of October 15th. I could never forget. We'd been open for around a week, and it was our busiest night so far. The weather was perfect. It was a clear sky with a full moon and wasn't really cold. We had a big crowd of families, teenagers, a couple of church groups too. Everything was going smooth. My spot was about halfway through the route, at this bend where the trail dips into a patch of woods. We called it Slasher Hollow. There's an old cattle gate there that's half fallen down. I'd hide behind it in a scarecrow mask with a fake machete. When the tractor came close, I'd jump out, wave the machete a bit, and chase the trailer for a few feet while everyone screamed. Then I'd let it pass and reset. That very night, about 9 o'clock, I was getting ready for another group to come through. I could hear the tractor coming up the hill, so I crouched down behind the gate like always. That's when I heard something move off to my right. It sounded heavier than one of the other actors. We usually had 2 people in my section, me and a girl named Lacey who dressed as a zombie and came out from the left side. But this wasn't her. The sound was behind me, deeper into the trees. I could hear sticks snapping, leaves crunching, slow steps that I could not mistake for anything else. I thought maybe one of the guys was trying to sneak up on me as a joke. So I whispered, "You better not do it, dude." But no one answered. The tractor was getting closer. The engine was low and steady. I could hear it. I peeked out to see its headlights coming through the trees. And that's when I caught a glimpse of this thing moving between the trees on my right side. It wasn't running. It was walking slowly, like it was timing itself with the noise of the tractor. It was extremely tall, and it was walking like a person on 2 legs, so I knew it wasn't an animal. At first, I definitely thought that it was someone who wandered off the path in a costume, or maybe someone that had gotten lost. But then it started getting closer. The light from the tractor just barely grazed across it for a second. I swear to God, it had a wolf's face. This wasn't plastic or rubber. This was real. It was a real snout, real fur. Its eyes lit up. A yellow reflection like you see in a dog's eyes when the headlights hit them. I just went completely still. It didn't look at me right away. It was staring toward the tractor like it was interested in the sound or the people on the trailer. It took another step forward and crouched behind one of the bigger trees. The tractor came around the bend, and the headlights hit me and the tree line at the same time. I just stood there frozen, still holding my fake machete. The people on the trailer started screaming and laughing, thinking I was doing my part. The tractor driver honked the horn like he always did when he passed my section. That thing used that noise to move itself. I watched it. It stepped out from behind the tree, still crouched down, and I saw the whole shape of it in the light. Tall, long arms, thick shoulders, fur covering its entire body. The legs were bent backwards like a dog's. It was close enough that I could hear it breathing over the tractor's engine. This thing was absolutely huge. Its head was way too big for its body. I can't even describe the size of this head. I remember it so clearly because the driver didn't even notice it. Everyone's attention was on me, waving the fake machete. I looked straight at that thing and it just looked at me the way a dog would. Then, right as the trailer started to pass, it stood all the way up. That's when the light caught its face full on, and that's when my bladder let loose. The snout, the eyes, the teeth. Now, it wasn't huge like a bear's, but they were too sharp, too clean. These teeth were curved. It almost reminded me of some type of shark. I froze, and one of the kids on the trailer yelled, "Holy crap, look at that one." Everyone laughed. They thought it was part of the show. I dropped the machete, the tractor moved on, and the lights faded, leaving me and that thing in the dark. I could still see the shape of it and the eyes because the moon was so bright. It didn't charge or growl. It didn't make any sounds. It just stood there looking down at me. This thing had to be 9 feet tall. There's no way it was any less. It turned and walked back into the trees like it was just done watching. I grabbed my flashlight and ran full speed toward the staging area where the other actors wait between groups. When I got there, I told my uncle that someone had brought a real animal costume and scared me half to death. He laughed and said, "I wish. You think I'd pay for something that good?" Lacey came running up a few minutes later saying she heard something big moving in the woods during that same run. She thought it was a deer until she saw me take off running. She got scared and followed. We finished the night, but I didn't go back to my spot. I stayed by the tractor pretending to help load people. Nobody else saw it that close. The next morning when we came out to clean up, I didn't find anything out there. There was no trace of anything gone wrong. I don't know how to prove this other than my word. I'm not one for lying, and I know this wasn't a costume. What I saw was real, and it was from the pits of hell. This thing had evil written all over it. I don't know why it didn't try to harm me. Of that I can't tell you, I can't explain. But it didn't, and I'm forever grateful. I feel like the Lord himself was watching over me. That has to be the only reason. In my mind, I think that thing didn't come there by accident. I think it had watched, and I think it knew exactly what night to show up when people would expect to see a monster, when no one would believe the difference. It waited for the noise, waited for the crowd, and made sure I was the only one who'd know the truth. That is sick and twisted. If that's not evil, tell me what is. This thing, for some reason, wanted someone to see it, and it chose me. That question will haunt me from now on. K. Reels. This one isn't my story exactly. It's my grandpa's. He told it to me 2 years ago, just before he went on to be with the Lord. I recorded him talking without him knowing at first, because I could tell it was something he'd never told anyone else before. It happened in the fall of 1996, the night before Halloween, just outside of Manchester, Tennessee. Back then, he was in his mid-40s, working long hours at a machine shop. He'd always take the back roads home, Old Hickory Creek Road. It was a 2-lane road that winds through farmland and some woods. There's no lights out there, not much traffic. He said he liked the quiet after working around all that noise all day. Completely understandable. That night he left work a little after 9. It was not quite freezing that night, but chilly. He said it was raining a bit, though the forecast had been clear. He was driving an old Ford Ranger that he so loved back then, had his windows cracked. Around one of the curves past the old grain silos, his headlights glanced onto something on the side of the road. He said that he instinctively thought it was a deer. He had hit a few before in that same spot. It was a thin shape, standing right near the ditch. But when he got closer, and it turned to face him, it wasn't a deer. He said to me, that's his exact words. I was confused at that point, because I'd never heard this story before, and I did not know where it was going. I honestly thought he was about to throw a Sasquatch story on me. He slowed down just a little, thinking maybe it was someone in a coat or a hunter dragging something. But then it stepped fully out onto the road. He told me it was walking upright, extremely tall. He said probably 6.5 to 7 feet. He said it was covered in dark black fur, and it looked like it was wet, probably from the rain. He said its front arms or legs were long enough that its hands nearly reached past its knees, which were bent backwards like a dog's. What froze him wasn't the size of it, though. He said the eyes were the worst part. They were a orangish yellow color, and they flashed like they were self-illuminated. That's not his words, but mine. I can't remember how he described it, but probably something to the term of battery-operated or like a flashlight. But from what he told me, they were self-illuminated, and they would brighten and then dim at certain points. Instead of turning away from the glare, it looked straight into the lights and straight into him. He didn't say it looked at him. He said it looked into him. He said he could see the mouth moving. It wasn't open. It wasn't baring its teeth. It just moved, like it was breathing through its mouth or trying to form something. He stopped the truck dead in the road, headlights on it, and then instead of running off like an animal would, it started moving closer, walking toward him right into the headlights. He said it tilted its head to one side and then back again, almost like it was checking to see if someone was in the truck watching. I remember him stressing the fact that he thought that it wanted him to see it, like it was feeding off of fear or some kind of terror. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, completely still, not able to move. The only sound was his truck and his own breathing. I'm telling this the best I can. The thing turned its head toward the woods beside the road, and he heard another sound, the snap of a branch followed by something bigger moving back in the trees. That's when it finally stepped off the road and took off, still upright, and was gone in the dark, and that was it. He sat there for a second, then just drove home. My grandmother remembered that night, too. She said he came in as white as a sheet, locked every door, and wouldn't talk about it for days. He stopped taking that road after dark completely. He drove a long time out of his way every night for years just to avoid it. When he told me this story, I asked him if he thought it was an animal or something else. He looked down for a long time before he said. And his exact words were, it was evil, and it was something that knew what it was doing. It wanted me to be scared. Maybe that's all it needed. He died about 6 months after he told me this story. We played one of his old tapes at the funeral, him talking about fishing and family stories. Now, I didn't play the one where he told this, though, not to anyone. I don't think anyone would have believed it anyway. I kept the tape, and every year around Halloween I find myself listening to it again. I can almost cry hearing his voice trembling a little when he says it. It wanted me to see it. Every time I drive home, after dark, and I catch a shadow in my headlights, doesn't matter if it's a deer, a raccoon, a cat, dog, it doesn't matter. I wonder if those things picked their moments, not to kill, not to chase, but just to remind us that they are in charge out there. Like they're waiting for someone that's willing or worthy to see them, or unlucky, however you want to look at it. E.
Hey, Reels. Thanks for writing back, man. I didn't really think you would, honestly. I know you get a lot of emails. I've been holding this in for years, and I thought, well, maybe if anyone is going to listen, it's going to be you. I'm up in Washington State near Forks. Yeah, that Forks, the one from the sappy vampire movies that I can't stand. It's mostly loggers and fishermen out here. In reality, I used to work for a small crew that did clearing jobs after storms roll through. This was 2011, I think. All the dates are fuzzy. I'm getting older now. We were working out past Saps Road, cleaning up where a big fir came down on some power lines. We were wrapping up late because the rain just wouldn't quit. Pretty typical. The light was starting to fade. One of the guys said he heard something behind the equipment. I figured it was a bear, 'cause they do wander around here sometimes. I went around to check and saw something duck down real fast behind a pile of brush. I called out and said, hey, knock it off, thinking it was the guys trying to prank me. Then I heard something breathing. It was low and heavy and close. I turned on a light and caught a glimpse of it standing up. I swear it was on 2 legs, tall as hell, maybe 8 foot or more. The hair was wet and stuck together like a dog that just came out of the river. The face was elongated and shaped like a canine, similar to a wolf, but the eyes were what was weird. I hear so many amber, red, blue, all types of colored glowing eyes. These were just dark, just black. It didn't act aggressive in any way. It just stood there for a few seconds, then casually turned and walked away into the timber. I couldn't even make myself yell for the others. I just stood there shaking till I couldn't hear it anymore. I told my brother about it later, and he said I must have seen a bear. Maybe I did. I don't know. But I can still see those dark black voids for eyes every time I think about what happened. That's all I have. I hope you can use it. Anonymous. Reels. I really hope I sent this to the right email. I'm not really too great at this. But I am a listener of your channel, and I truly appreciate what you do. I live outside of Houma, Louisiana. Been here my whole life. I work nights at a seafood plant, so I get off early morning usually when it's still dark. I take the same back road every night, called Bayou Black Drive, and there ain't much out there besides water and trees. This happened about 4 years ago. I was driving home about 3 in the morning, and it was foggy as hell that night. Thick enough I had to keep it slow.
I came around a curve and saw something standing right by the guardrail. At first I thought it was a deer, 'cause we get 'em all the time, but when it moved and I could see it was standing upright, I hit the brakes and the thing turned its head right toward my car. I didn't even know how to describe it right. Looked like a wolf, but the body was human-shaped and too big. The arms were long and low like a man's. Its hair was dark and a bit scruffy around the chest and shoulders. I could see the ribs shifting and moving underneath this gray leathery skin. The hair was pretty thin and you could see through it around the abdomen or stomach area. I sat there in the middle of the road, pretty sure I wasn't even breathing. It just watched me for a bit and stepped over the guardrail and went down toward the water. I just watched as it disappeared into the fog, and that was it. It didn't stick around. I just drove off slow, trying my best not to even look in the mirrors. Seeing it once was plenty enough for me. For weeks after that, I just kept thinking about it. I still do. Occasionally, but not as much as I used to. For a long time, I couldn't sleep very well. My wife said I was dreaming when I'd wake up sweating, but I wasn't. I saw what I saw. The part that really bothers me most of the time is how it acted. It didn't act like a normal wildlife animal that's scared of cars or noise. It looked right at me like it knew what I was and what the car was. I don't know what these things are, but I don't think they're just animals. It felt too intelligent, too aware, too human in the eyes. Maybe something old that just never died out. I don't know. But every time the fog rolls in now, I'll take the long way home. Thank you very much. A. I really hope I don't regret this, because each time I've came out and told someone, I have. I just talk myself out of it because I'm tired of the ridicule and the accusations of being a liar. I live a few miles outside of Rifle, Colorado, up on a ridge. It's quiet out here, mostly ranch land and BLM property. I was cleaning my gutters last fall 'cause the pine needles always pile up bad after wind. It was probably around noon. The sky was clear. It was a day where I could see forever out over the hills. It was in broad daylight. I had the ladder leaned against the porch roof, scooping stuff out with my hands. At one point I stopped because it got super quiet. The birds stopped. The wind even seemed to die down. It was a weird stillness that made me start looking around and over my shoulder. Down by the trees, maybe 60 yards out, I did see movement. It was something tall walking along the slope. It looked like a hiker from that distance, but nobody comes through there. It's private and the country is extremely rough. This thing was moving very quickly across terrain that should not have been covered that fast. And it was moving strange. It was kind of hunched, but it wasn't on all fours. I started to realize it wasn't wearing clothes. It was covered in dark brown hair, long in some spots and thin in others, like it was shedding. It stopped for a second and turned its head toward the house. I don't know if it saw me up there or it just felt me watching, but being as I could see it clearly, I would almost bet that it could see me as well, especially being up on that ladder. After it turned its head in my direction, it straightened up more completely, standing up. I could tell right then and there that this wasn't a bear for sure. Its arms were too long. It had what looked like hands hanging low past the knees almost. It looked around like it was checking the area and then just kept going till it was gone behind the ridge. I got down off the ladder so fast I nearly fell. I just sat in the kitchen for a long while, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. I didn't tell anyone, not even my son. This is something you don't share very often, or at least I don't. Sometimes I still think about it when I'm out mowing or when the dogs start barking at night. I don't think it was some ghost or demon like some people believe. This thing looked alive, real, too real. I keep wondering if there's some kind of animal that figured out how to stay away from people, like an offshoot of something old that just stays hidden out there. All I know is it wasn't supposed to be there. These things aren't supposed to be real. I wish I hadn't seen it because now I can't unsee it. I appreciate you reading this. Thanks. Real Adventures. I hope you don't mind me typing this way. I'm not great at it. I live up in Vermont near Rutland. I've lived out here my entire life, so I'm very familiar with the landscape and the wildlife. I walk my dog every day after lunch down this old dirt road that cuts through some state land. I've been doing that same walk for years and never had a problem until last spring. The snow had just melted off and everything was soggy and muddy. I was letting my dog sniff around near a culvert when she just stopped dead. She tucked her tail. I thought maybe she saw an animal, but then I heard something low. It was a low huff sound from across the road. It wasn't extremely loud, more like a person trying to clear their throat. I looked up, and there was something standing behind a maple a few yards away. I'd guess maybe 30 or 40 yards. Not good with judging distance. It was tall, taller than any man I've ever seen. It had this grayish hair hanging off it like an old wolf, but with shoulders like a football player. It didn't move for probably a good 10 seconds. It just stood there half behind the tree watching me. I honestly think it did not know that I could see it. It thought it was hidden. My dog started whining and pulled at the leash trying to go the other way. I started backing up slow, keeping my eyes on it. It leaned out just a little farther like it was trying to see me better. The face was long, but not stretched out like a cartoon wolf. The mouth was hanging open a bit, and I could see teeth even from that distance. This thing had some big teeth. Its eyes were spaced far apart as well. This was definitely a predatory beast. I didn't run, I knew better. I just turned around and fast walked till I hit the main road. Once I got back to the house, I locked the doors, like the world was about to close in on me, and like that would do any good anyway. The size of this thing I saw, there's no way a door would stop it. I didn't even go back out there for months. It's weird, 'cause I always thought if I saw something like that, I'd want to go back and prove it. But I don't. I don't even like thinking about it. I can't explain what I saw that day, but it wasn't a bear or a guy in a suit. Bears don't stand that still, and people don't have eyes that shine in daylight. I know everyone has their theories and opinions on what Dogman is. I have my own opinions, and I feel like they're just as valid as anyone else's. We're all just guessing at this point. I think they are somehow linked to the Nephilim in some way. I don't know how, but I do know the Bible speaks of things like this. I think they've been here all this time, and people just don't notice them, or they don't know how to notice them. Maybe they can camouflage in some way that keeps them from being noticed. Whatever they are, I hope I never see another one. Anonymous. Hey, I forgot to mention a lot of details before in my other email, so I'm redoing the whole thing. I hope that's okay. This was up in western Pennsylvania a few years ago. I was cutting through a back road near Marionville. I was just trying to save time. Wasn't even dark yet, maybe 6:30 or so. There's an old field that runs along the road, half overgrown with tall grass. I saw movement out there. Thought for sure it was a deer, so I slowed down. Whatever it was, as soon as I started to slow my speed, it stood up on its hind legs. I don't mean this thing climbed or stretched. I mean it stood up, taller than the weeds themselves, easily over 7 foot. I almost wrecked because I was staring too hard. It turned toward me and the sunlight hit its face. It wasn't right. It looked like a mix between a person and a German shepherd. It had its mouth open, showing me its teeth. The body was thin but not sickly looking. Just the arms were really skinny and long. Like it could move fast if it really chose to. I didn't stop, of course. I just kept driving, like I wanted to survive this encounter. But I did watch the mirrors the whole way home to make sure it wasn't chasing me. I've heard these things can follow you home, and that's definitely my worst nightmare. The crazy thing, and what surprised me the most, is how normal it acted. It wasn't hiding or trying to run away. This thing was just watching cars like it was supposed to be out there, like it belonged, like it was normal. For weeks after, I kept telling myself maybe it was a guy in some kind of costume or someone playing a prank. But this thing moved too smooth, too real. I can't explain none of it. I don't even like that road anymore. I get a strange feeling just being out there. This has had a major effect on my mental state. Sometimes I wonder if these things stay out there just watching people and waiting to choose someone to terrify. Especially, it seems to be people who don't believe in this stuff. Maybe that's why most folks never see them. 'Cause they just don't believe and they're not even looking around. That would explain a lot. I'm just spitballing here, but that's better than just saying nothing. I hope this helps someone, or maybe it'll help me. I'm praying that something good comes of all this. B. First things first, this was completely random. I wasn't even supposed to be out that long. I'd gone into town to grab gas and a few things for dinner. I took the long way back because the sun was going down and it looked nice over the lake. I remember thinking I should have brought my camera because the sky was orange and purple over the trees. There's this stretch where the road dips down and the woods get close on both sides. I slowed down a bit because a rabbit ran across, and that's when I saw this thing. It was big, and it stepped out from behind a pine maybe 20 yards up. I thought this was a person, because what else could it be? I wasn't looking for Dogman or Bigfoot. Your brain doesn't immediately go to something that's not supposed to be real. But this was obviously not human because of the way it was moving. It crossed halfway, then stopped in the middle of the road. It was kind of turning, like it couldn't decide which way to go. I had my headlights on low, and they hit it just enough for me to see some details and see fur all over. It was dark brown in color. It reminded me of a coyote's winter coat, but the hair was longer. I could see the shape of its arms and the way the knees were bent wrong. It turned its head toward me, and I froze up. It knew I was there for sure. There was no way that it didn't. It just stood watching. The eyes didn't glow red or yellow. They were a light blue color and very deep, like they could soak up the light instead of it bouncing it off. After a few nightmarish seconds, it dropped down on all fours and went off the side into the trees. It was moving extremely fast, unnaturally fast. I waited a bit, then drove on. slow, trying not to think about what just happened. I was near a panic attack. I couldn't catch my breath, and I kept catching movement at the edges of the road like it was pacing me through the woods, though I never saw it directly after that. When I got home, I parked right by the porch light and sat in the truck for a few minutes. I could still see that shape crossing the road in my mind. It's like it's a film on replay. I told my brother a few days later, and he said a couple loggers had seen something weird around the river years back. They just called it the dog thing. I had never heard of this, but I can tell you I believe they saw something because I saw the dog thing, as they call it, as well. I don't really know what else you would call it, unless you want to call it what it looks like, which is a werewolf. I don't care what you call it. I know what I saw, and I hate how quiet it was when it looked at me. It's been over a year, and I still take that long highway now, even if it adds 20 minutes to my drive. I just can't bring myself to go down that road anymore. Seeing something like this will definitely have an impact on everything you do, every move you make, every decision you make for the rest of your life. Something about it, on that road, feels watched. Anonymous. Like most people in this situation, I never thought that I would be writing something like this. I live right off Highway 101, about halfway between Coos Bay and Florence, Pacific Coast. You can smell the ocean most days from my porch. It's extremely quiet out here most of the time, which is why I like it. There's a lot of fog, a lot of driftwood that piles up on the beach after storms. This was early in the morning, right before sunrise. I walked the beach some days to clear my head. I was down past the last beach house when it turns rocky. The tide was out far and everything looked kind of silver from the moon still being up. I noticed these weird marks at first. Big ones, and they weren't human, not bear. They were too big, too long, too narrow in the middle. I followed them for a little ways out of curiosity, thinking maybe it was some sort of injured animal. But they stayed the same shape all the way down. I saw movement near one of the washed-up logs. Something hunched over like it was digging. I stopped because it was big enough to be a person, but it didn't move like one, and it was covered in fur. My brain immediately went to bear. It turned its head, and I saw the profile. It had a muzzle, but it wasn't extremely long. Its ears were up high, and it had thick hair covering the whole body, black in color. It was hanging off of the neck like seaweed. It was very long, like it had a mane. I must have unknowingly made some type of sound because its head snapped around really fast and it stood completely up. This thing was taller than me by a long shot. It had to be at least 8 foot. Its eyes flashed for a second. They weren't glowing, they just caught the reflection. It looked like it was breathing hard. Its chest was moving quickly. I knew not to run, but I did start backing away, trying to make distance between us. I hit the dunes. It didn't follow, thank God. It just watched me go. Then it turned and walked toward the surf like it was done. The weirdest part was watching it go right into the water. It never was swimming exactly, it just walked in until it was out of sight. I stood there for a minute before I could breathe again. The prints were already filling with water by the time I looked down. I got back home and didn't mention it to a soul for about a week. There's a lot of nights out here where you can hear things move outside. It's kind of normal, but these sound like big things that I didn't notice before. You shine your light and you don't find anything. I don't know what Dogman is, but I know I saw one, and it acted like it knew that beach better than I did. Maybe they use the shoreline to move around because nobody goes out that early. I still walk, sometimes, but not before sunrise, not after seeing that. Not after knowing what's out there lurking around. I just can't do it. It's not safe. Even though that one let me walk away, the next one might not. I keep thinking I'll see it again, standing out in the surf, just waiting. Hello. I don't like thinking about this, so I'll just jump right into it to get it over with quickly. I'm right outside of Elko, Nevada, maybe 15 minutes from Lamoille Canyon. There's just dirt roads, old fences, and wind. This happened Saturday evening right before sunset, about 2 years ago. I'll never forget the day that it happened. I was out behind the shed fixing a busted line on my water tank. The air had that weird stillness you get before dark. There was no bugs, no sound, just the wind far off. I kept hearing crunches on the hill behind me, but didn't think much of it. We get a lot of mule deer all the time, so it didn't disturb me very much. Then one of those sounds landed a lot heavier, a lot closer. This wasn't a hop or a scurry, it was a step, clear as day. I turned expecting to see a deer, or maybe a stray cow, as strange as that sounds, but it was standing straight up. It was in the junipers, appearing to try to hide, but the shoulders were wider than any person. It would be hard to hide when you're that big. Its fur was gray, and it looked rough, like it had been through a fire or something. Its head was the shape of a coyote's, but stretched forward. Just not right, let's put it that way. When the sun hit its face, its eyes, it flicked back like a reflection, just catching light like they were made out of glass. I was just standing there holding a wrench. It shifted its weight and came out a few feet. I think it noticed that I'd spotted it. It crouched low like it was about to move quickly. Then it started stepping side to side, slow but tense, like it was trying to line me up. Every time I took a step back, it shifted too, in the same direction. That's when I yelled. I didn't even mean to, it just came out. That's when it got a whole different demeanor. Its shoulders rolled, and for a second I thought it was coming for me. Then it stopped, like it was thinking about it. The sound it made next, I will never forget. It was like a bark and a scream, all mashed together. It was deep enough to hit me in the chest. I dropped the wrench and ran inside the shed and shut the door. It was the closest, safe structure I could get to. I locked it, even though the lock is useless. I stood there holding the handle, waiting for something to happen. Out of nowhere it hit the side one time, a single thud that rattled the tools. Then I just heard it breathing, long pulls of air like something standing right on the other side of the wall. It still gives me the creeps thinking I was that close. I stayed there until dark. I didn't even want to or try to peek out. I didn't want to see it again. I'd seen enough. After a while, the breathing slowed down and then came to a stop. All I could hear was the wind again. Now, people will always say you saw something normal, mistaken identity. You were just scared. It had to be a bear, right? No, this wasn't just a normal animal passing through. There's no mistaking something this big, and if anyone says they do, they are lying. It's just obvious. This thing was checking me, testing how I'd react. I haven't been back behind that shed very much at all, not unless I have to. I moved the tank hose around to the front. I told the neighbor the line froze so he wouldn't ask any questions. Dogman, I saw one, and it wanted me gone, and it definitely worked. If you see one, please take every precaution you can. Don't run unless you have to. That's my advice. I hope it helps. Dave. You ask for people to send in their experiences. Challenge accepted. I wasn't really willing to tell this before, but listening to your uploads, I kind of trust you for some reason. I don't mean that to offend anyone, it's just the way I feel. I live up near Millinocket, Maine. Most of what's around here is logging trails and frozen ponds for half the year. This happened the end of January this year, actually. My wife had gone into town and I was stacking firewood by the porch before it got dark. The sky was that gray color it gets before it snows. I kept hearing this weird knocking sound from the trees across the driveway. It was like someone tapping on a tree with a piece of wood, but they always came in 3 knocks, and then a silence in between. I thought it was just branches hitting in the wind, but it was loud, and the air was dead still. I couldn't make sense of it, so I called out thinking maybe my neighbor was back there with a hammer or something I don't know. That's just where my mind went to try to make sense of it. I got no response. That's about the time I saw movement back between the trees. There wasn't much, just a quick flash, just a shape, shifting from side to side, moving from left to right. I thought it was a person wearing a dark jacket until it stepped forward and I realized how big it was. The shoulders were huge and angled forward like it had to hunch to fit behind the trees. Its hair was long hanging off the arms. The hands were hanging low enough to brush its knees. And no, for the Bigfoot folks, this was not a Bigfoot. This thing had a canine head, I saw it clearly. I started backing toward the porch, but it never seemed to be interested in following me. It just stepped out far enough that I could see the head. It made this weird sound, a single low whine. It wasn't angry, more like something that was curious. I froze halfway up the steps, and it tilted its head like it was trying to figure out why I had stopped. Maybe it was trying to scare me, I don't really know. We just stood there, like that, for about 10 seconds. After a while, it just lost interest, I guess, and turned away and walked off. I never heard a sound as it moved. The quiet after it was gone was horrible as well. I'm just curious if anyone has been able to deal with this or move past it. How do you move past realizing something like this is sharing the planet with us? I told my wife to be careful that I'd heard a bunch of coyotes close by. I told her to start leaving the porch light on at night and to not go into the woods. I used to walk over there occasionally where I saw it, but I wouldn't dare go back in that area since that. I don't think it wanted to hurt me, but it knew that I saw it. And once it knows you've seen it, it feels like it's still somewhere close at all times. People always say that if you see one, then you're prone to seeing another one. I hope that's not the case. Anonymous. Reels. Just to be straight up, I've never been that close to dying before. This happened 6 months ago, out near Cedar Bluff in Kansas. I was driving the dirt road that runs behind the reservoir 'cause I like to night fish down there. It was maybe 10:30, Still warm out, my windows were cracked. About a mile from the lake, I saw something in my headlights off the right side of the road. I thought it was just an animal, as most people would, until it completely stood up on its back legs. I slammed on the brakes and it just stood there in the ditch, like it was just as confused as me. It was taller than the stop sign beside of it. It had clumps of mud or something in its hair. This thing was gross looking. I could almost smell it with my eyes. It was disgusting and horrifying at the same time. Its eyes were just shining white in the headlights. I don't even know what made me do it, but I held on the horn. That thing flinched, and it seemed to get angry because it came right at my truck. It slammed into the front end of my truck so hard I thought it'd rip the bumper off. I remember screaming, but everything sounded muffled and in slow motion. I slammed it in reverse, but it was already on the hood of my truck. As I took off faster, I cut the wheel and it slid off to the driver's side. I could see its teeth snapping right at the windshield. I saw the face up close. It had black skin under the hair, and long teeth like a dog, but they were very jagged like broken glass. I floored it in reverse until I hit the embankment, and it finally gave no more chase. I threw it in drive and punched it. I looked in the mirror, and I could see it chasing on all fours. It kept up with me for a few seconds before it veered off into the grass and disappeared. I didn't dare stop till I was at a gas station back in town. The hood was dented a bit, and I did find some scratches, or what you would call claw marks, as clear as day. But I don't even care. I'm not showing anyone because I don't want the sheriff or anyone thinking that I'm a complete psycho, and I don't want people coming around asking me a ton of goofy questions. I can't convince anyone what happened. Hell, these scratches could have came from anything, or I could have made them myself to fake all this. But why? I'm not going to do any speculation here. I don't know anything. I don't know if it was trying to kill me, or just mad that I saw it, or angry that I blew that horn. It wasn't scared. I can assure you of that. This thing definitely wanted me gone, or maybe worse. I used to go fishing almost every weekend. I haven't been once since that happened.